Is my mic working?
Yeah, it's super faint. It's starting to get louder. Hello, Brandon.
Hello, hello. Apologies for any audio problems on my side.
No worries. You sound a little overdriven on the mic.
A little too loud. I can talk
gain.
quieter. I can talk quieter.
However you want to adjust the gain is Hey, Steve. Hey, Josh.
Hey, folks.
Hello.
We assume you're injured because you're holding your coffee with two, or is that a two hands, or is that a Zen thing?
It's a Zen thing, yeah.
It's a Zen thing.
Okay, how about now?
Yeah, that sounds much better, Nisha.
That's weird. I clicked the automatically adjust microphone volume before to adjust the microphone volume, and this time it didn't work.
I found that the automatic adjust turns you way down.
I also have a thing on called suppress background noise.
You sound really good right now.
Oh, well, okay. I'll leave it like this.
Congrats on the new gig, Nisha.
I've started the new gig. It's the usual fire hose of information for new hires.
Well, we're lucky they haven't taken you away from us yet.
I don't think I would have taken the job if I wasn't allowed to continue to do this. I think they seem to be beefing up their open source community stuff too. They've gotten Kim McMahon and now.
All right, are we going to give people another 2 minutes? Or do we want to kick things off?
I think we could probably kick it off. How's everyone feel about that?
Sounds
Excellent.
good.
All right. I'll kind of kick it off here. I put myself as note taker. I feel like I should do that this week. So would somebody else like to chair? Brandon, would you be able to set us up and kick us off and keep us on task, or somebody else? You're actually presenting, so maybe not you.
I'm presenting, so I'll keep myself on task.
Anybody else want to chair?
I can help.
Go ahead, Nisha. I'll take notes, but you can chair.
Okay. So hello everyone. Welcome to the OCI reference types working group. And I keep forgetting what else Lucky says. He says some nice things.
I can say it. I just say hello. It's a beautiful Tuesday. It's March 15th, 2022, and this conversation is being recorded and will be posted publicly. So please treat everybody with respect and use kind words, as this will be posted and immortalized on YouTube. Something to that effect, Nisha.
Please be nice to each other and don't say anything you don't want anyone else to use against you.
Treat people how you would like to be treated yourself is generally the rule. Yes.
That was
Yes.
a very pragmatic approach to that. That was good, Nisha.
It is what it is. Oops. Okay, let's get started. So on the agenda today, we have follow-ups on a number of pull requests that are open right now. Brandon is leading that, so take it away, Brandon.
Yeah, I don't know if I need to fun up too much. I'm on a small screen today. So I put out there, I'm going to keep this quick because I want to save most of the discussion today for talking about Proposal C. But put out there just a quick bit I want to discuss about this, where I've got a bunch of these things where I said yes, yes, yes. Sound like the other person on the other side of the Verizon commercial, where there probably needs to be more than just a yes, yes, yes. We need to say what it is we're talking about there. So my question that I have is, does it make sense to update our template to say at the end of the template, put in your responses to all those things, and then after we've filled out the responses with the description, it's yes because, yes why. I've explained how each of these solutions solves each of the questions we got on our requirements. Then take that one little initial column of yes, no, maybe so, and copy that to the rubric after the fact, after we discussed it and whatnot. And so does it make sense to put some of these discussions we're having in our template itself, in our proposal, rather than do it as directly in the rubric? I wanted to query the group for that idea.
Anyone have their hand up for that? I can't see. Yeah, raise hands if you have any feedback.
Or speak up, because when I'm presenting, I can't see a lot of things and have to move
Lucky?
windows all around.
I was just going to say, I like that, Brandon. I think there's details. I read, Nisha's comments, and I think putting them in the proposals is as good a place as any. Whether you just put an FAQ at the bottom makes sense, and then people can reference it. Maybe just the bit we're going to need to do is, if you've said yes to a specific, CF.3, then at least carry that over so they know which question it was to be asked about.
Yeah, I was going to do the list saying, okay, we've got B1, B2, B3, C1, C2, and the filters as well. I was going to take those bullet numbers and just basically make maybe a 3-column table, which was the item number, the identifier, yes, no, maybe so in the middle, and then a description of why on the right. And that would go nicely in the proposal, but then we just take that middle column out of there and copy that over to the reference. Don't delete it, but just copy it over to the reference, or to the rubric, sorry.
Josh, your hand is up.
Yeah, I'm not incredibly opposed to that. One of the things I was hoping to get at with the template for these is that the person submitting it could submit it without any real review, because it's their proposal. And so for you to come forward and say yes on all these, that actually requires further eyes, to keep people honest on things.
We could also leave it. It could also be left blank and filled in later.
I think
Okay.
it does.
Yeah.
It basically lets the person submitting the PR, put a claim as to why they think it meets certain goals and not. I think going back to the rubric document, because remember the rubric was in its own PR, its own file, that if in their submission of it, this is what their thoughts are and how it meets those goals, that is their opinion. The group then decides, does it really meet that goal in the rubric doc?
So I guess this is a process question here. If folks are challenging whether it's a yes or the yes or no in the rubric, where do those discussions go?
I kind of like having that extended amount of detail both in the PR and in whatever we commit to the individual proposal, and that way the rubric remain simple.
Do you think that it's useful to have a summary in the PR itself before merging the PR? So people don't have to go back and forth between all the conversations. Like they don't have to read a mailing list to find out why the rubric was merged with those yes/no answers.
Yeah, I'd like the proposal to be kind of that one-stop shop for everything. If it gets approved, people just have to look at the one proposal file and understand how it's implemented, why it's implemented, all the discussion around it without having to pull pieces in from other places.
Josh, you
Not-
have.
Sorry. I have something to say, but maybe not important. So the reason I'm not really feeling this is I could put up a proposal that's just terrible, but it could still be put into this repo. That meets none of the goals of the working group. And so that's why I don't really know why it belongs in this document. The other thing is that these are like almost historical at this point. Brandon, yours is a little bit newer, but the other three have been around, and I want to just get them in as they were. And then as a group, we come up with like the final thing, and it's less about, I don't know, I'll stop talking. I just think that our output is going to be a mix of these, and spending too much time in these documents, updating them, like I never really thought of them as something to be updated. It's like a snapshot of these are the original proposals. Now as a group, we come up with the actual thing.
So understood. I had approved like every proposal like that because I was thinking, okay, this is a good way to get us started, is to just merge how it exists right now. But the purpose of the rubric is for facilitating discussions like this. Okay, why do you think it solves it? Or this person over here doesn't think that it solves that. How would you recommend we record that, Josh?
I think that we should do it and link them to the proposals, but I think bloating the actual proposal document like isn't the idea, and this is just like, you can disagree with me. This is part of my idea, is just you can have these proposals like in a piece of paper format, and it doesn't get filled up with FAQ. This is why it fits all these things. Like I feel I'm not going to die on this hill. So we can put them in here. I will approve that PR.
Hey, how about you suggest a couple other things, Josh? Just yell some things
Yeah,
out. We could do a link to a discussion. We could put an
Just like we
issue.
have the proposals folder here, we could have a evaluations folder and just have the exact same layout ABCD, but just have the table there, because I'm trying to visualize these things as steps in our process. And so once we get all 4 of these proposals, we've reached some plateau.
Yeah, a milestone.
I feel. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so like I feel like those documents are done. That's a historical thing, and we do not go back to them. Now, the fact that 3 of them are already in leads me to say that we now need to PR against them again to say this is actually how they are to be evaluated. When really, some of this is not a Boolean yes or no. It's like, yes, but, and I don't know. I don't know what's best. I'm more about like, how do we progress in moving through these stages?
I'm gonna say I have my hand up. And how about this? let's merge the proposals, but we punt on merging the rubrics and continue discussions over there. So we're in a place where we are still accepting proposals. As far as format is concerned, if they meet the format, then it's fine, we'll still merge it. But the rubric evaluation conversations would be on the PR, and it'll be ongoing until everyone has decided on what the evaluation is. Lucky has his hand up.
Okay, so you're just saying punt the putting them in a place right now. That'll just be on the PR.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with wherever we want to put it. My preference is kind of keep everything in one place, but if we want to separate out into two places, I'm fine with that too. I just want to, whatever we make our decision, and then we'll move that discussion on how these things fit into the rubric to that place whenever we come up with that location, instead of trying to solve everything in these little meetings, because we only got so much time here. And so with that, I want to push the discussion over to the next item, which was niches.
Okay. I need to share my screen, huh?
Sorry for the surprise transition, but I did promise I was going to keep us up to 10 minutes.
I will see if I can meet that.
Lucky, are you?
Barring
hand up?
any-
You don't have, you've got all the time you want, Nisha. I'm keeping myself to 10 minutes so that we can keep yours as long as we go.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay, so the proposal is basically to create a new manifest called a node manifest. The proposal was created after much discussion about, I guess, the backwards compatibility discussion. So now we have backwards compatibility requirements, and I'm hoping that it can be evaluated against those. So this is basically a manifest. This schema version is a schema version indicating that it is a new change, which probably requires a major update, but I'm not sure because I do not know the historical reasons for making major version bumps. So I think it's a major version bump. Up to you, Lucky. You have your hand up, Lucky. No.
Just didn't put it down. Sorry. I was trying to have a look. There was a participant called Dev Kai with a Q that came in on an iPhone. And so I was trying to, okay. Looks like they may have come back now. Okay. Sorry. Yeah. I need to drop my hand in software.
Nice. Okay. Sorry for that. So that's my explanation for adding schema version 3 instead of 2, because it's a new thingy. There's a reserved media type called node. It'll contain a thing called description, which I think is a good placeholder to put things like artifact type, and any kind of like vendor description of what it is and what tools use it, etc., etc. There is a list of objects, and those are the list of blob descriptors that would be encased in this node. And then there is a reference. This will be only either one or nothing. So this is the thing that points to some other artifact. So they all use descriptors as specified by the image manifest right now. This is an example of how one would say that, so many ice cream ingredients point to a particular ice cream flavor. So here is like a flavor like chocolate, and here is a flavor topping that's from, I don't know, sprinkles galore. And that goes into a package called ice cream sprinkles. So that's how you could like group things like, well, I guess the equivalent here is signatures and SBOMs, and have them point to a particular container image. This is how one can group together multiple, I guess, container images to refer to like an application. So this is Neapolitan ice cream, and that's made up of 3 different ice creams. So the 3 different ice creams are here, and that can have a reference to a Neapolitan ice cream. And this is I do want to say that this node manifest looks very similar to the index.json, except that it adds a description. It adds a description blob, and it adds a reference blob. So it does provide a bit of an upgrade path. So the reason why I didn't use index particularly is because I am not sure what the effect is on clients that depend on index in order to find container images for different platforms. So it's kind of like an encasing around it. So these objects can be anything. They can be a single artifact. It can be an index. It can be a container image. It can also be another node manifest. So because it can be another node manifest, you can make tree structures like this, where you would have, let's say, there are some existing ice creams that was uploaded. Here's a vanilla ice cream that was created 2 months ago, and it's not referencing anything. Here's a chocolate ice cream that was uploaded 1 month ago, and it's not referencing anything. And then you can add a new ice cream that was created 2 days ago called vanilla chocolate swirl that also doesn't reference anything, but you can group these objects that you had uploaded before at some particular time, and then reference them later. So I am not very good at designing APIs, I'll say that up front, but I just have a bunch of APIs that return those like either like bits and pieces of this manifest, or return some collection of things of importance. So the referrers one is similar to proposal A, where it gets back based on image and based on image tag or image digest, it'll get back a bunch of objects, a list of descriptors that refer to it. Then you can also get a reference if you had the digest of the node manifest. You can get either the reference or the description or the list of objects. And that's basically all these things. Okay. And that's the end of the proposal. Does anyone have any questions? There were some questions on the PR. Let me go back, and I don't know if we can take a look at that. Yes,
I know
Brandon.
one of the ones that I had raised in the PR itself, when we're looking at the objects field in a lot of these schemas, is the objects just manifest? Is it just blobs, or is it both? And do we have to access that through the objects API, or can we access it through the manifest or the blob APIs? I'm trying to think of how this interacts with what's in a registry today and how they would work with this.
Yeah. So the objects are just supposed to be descriptors. So I would say that if you want to access like an existing manifest, then this would be like vendor OCI image manifest with the size and the digest, and that's it.
And maybe where I'm going with that is if object can point to a blob, because I feel like some of the things in there might be blobs that you're pointing to, like packages and batches. I'm not sure what the different things are that you're including in there.
No, it should be able to point to anything, but go ahead.
And then if you're also pointing to other objects, because you can possibly have this hierarchical, it gets confusing from the client standpoint to know when they look at any one of those things, which API they should send their request to.
Yeah, this is my, like, this is the downside of this, is that even though you have an encasing like that, it may conflict with some existing APIs.
Well, not even conflicting with the existing APIs, but if you're trying to write a client that's querying this, if I tried to query this and say, let me get the whole tree structure of one of these things, I don't know which of the two APIs I need to be hitting. Is everything the objects API or some things a blob API? I don't know how to write the code that can query this.
Yeah, so this is where I feel like, version control might be useful for it. So you have a choice between either fetching a blob or fetching this tree. Yeah, I would think that there would be a way to interact with the registry via the node, or you can use the old APIs to get the manifest. So you can use v2/manifests or v2/manifest, but you can also use like v3/node.
So I think that actually answers the question I had on the PR, or maybe answers it, maybe at least points to an answer. The question I had on the PR was, I don't know if it was spelled out this well, or if I'm about to spell it out well just now. But basically, if I push a v2 image manifest, do I need to push the v3 form of that same thing to be able to attach stuff to it? It sounds like the answer is that you're envisioning no, that I would be able to push a v2 manifest, and then like behind the scenes, the v3 form of it would also exist, at which point I could start attaching manifests to it. Is that correct?
Yeah, so my understanding is that if you were using v2, then you would be pushing manifests as they exist. But if you wanted to use v3, then you don't have to touch those manifests. You can just point to them using this.
Right. Okay. So even that's a different answer than I thought I was. I mean, that's a good answer too. That I can, using the v3 APIs, point to things that only exist as v2 image or index manifests.
Right.
Okay.
Right. But if you wanted to, if you didn't use v2 at all, and you start off with v3, you can build you can build everything from the ground up with just using V3.
I see. And Brandon's question was if if I see objects in this list, pointers to other things, I don't know whether they're V2 or V3 objects from this information, but that it doesn't matter. I can
Yes.
ask V3 for a V2 object and it will
Yes.
answer that for me.
Yes. It shouldn't matter.
Interesting. Okay. I will cede my time.
Josh has a question. Josh?
Yeah, sorry. I'm sort of confused by the addition of both objects and reference, and maybe you can just explain which is like in which instance I would use one or the other. Because I'm looking at like the Neapolitan thing. I'm imagining you would push to a namespace called Neapolitan and not describe itself in the node manifest itself. So I must be misunderstanding.
Yeah, that's a good question. I am envisioning that if you had something like a Helm chart that you pushed as a blob, so I'm guessing that would just be like a JSON blob. If you want to point to that blob and connect several container images to that blob, then you can do it this way. That's one real world example, I guess. So mostly I was thinking about Kubernetes applications or cloud native applications or Kubernetes deployments.
Oh yeah, I mean that's totally on my mind as well. I'm just maybe a better way for me to understand it, maybe others, is like, can you walk through the series of pushing of let's say Neapolitans, the Helm chart, and I don't know, ice cream containers, the image. I'm trying to understand the process. Can we upload all these things at one time, or what's the entry point? Is it the node manifest?
So here's what I would say. You could upload. So Glenn and Larry have different kinds of ice cream flavors that are just like one flavor. So they have already existing chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry flavor. And those exist, in their inventory. And they decide, okay, I want to define a Neapolitan ice cream that makes use of these 3 existing ice creams that we have. I will make something like a definition, like instructions on how to make this Neapolitan ice cream. And I will push that first, and then I can push this node manifest that explains these are the particular batches that you should use for this Neapolitan ice cream. Either you could do it that way, or you can push this all at once, like push the Neapolitan ice cream definition and then push this node manifest.
So the reference media type is, I guess, maybe I'm thrown off by the word reference, because this, I think, is eerily similar to OCI artifacts, right? Where you're like, that's basically config media type, if I'm understanding what you're trying to do. No?
No, not really. So I get the feeling that there is some amount of freedom over here for folks to define what they want to reference. So I would imagine that you could do something like, suppose you wanted to define a Neapolitan ice cream, you could not use a reference, but use another node manifest that contains the Neapolitan ice cream thingy, and then you don't need this. This itself can be like Neapolitan ice cream. It's got all of these ingredients, blah blah blah, that can go into the description, and you can just keep these objects. So
I
in
think,
that,
go ahead, Nisha, I'm sorry.
well, so yeah,
Yeah,
so
I'm clarified.
okay, so in that way, it looks kind of like index, like proposal D, except that you would be relying heavily on the description part to describe, the whole process of making a Neapolitan ice cream. Now, suppose you want the process of making a Neapolitan ice cream to live in a different blob, then instead of embedding it in the description, you can have a reference to that blob. Maybe that helps a little bit, Josh?
A little bit. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't still a little confused by that field, the reference field, but maybe more questions will
Steve,
unearth
you had a question?
Yeah, I was trying to understand the site also, and I think this looks something like what we try to do here. I'll just post the PR here. In the ORA's artifact manifest, we have blobs, which is layers. We just generically renamed them to be more generic, but there's still the blobs API. When you store, and if I read your example, a Neapolitan is made up of 3 layers of ice cream: chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry. I mean, it's actually kind of a fun scenario in some ways, but they are blob content. Right? It's as opposed to it's a manifest that points to another thing. You could argue chocolate, vanilla, and ice cream are individual artifacts. So that's why the example, it makes it a little confusing. My point is that what I think you're trying to do is an object is a collection of descriptors, and it could be a manifest or a blob, so that you can actually aggregate a collection of layers, and manifest was represent other artifacts. We tried going down that path. We were going down that path with the orders artifact manifest, and the differentiator, because you have to figure out which API you're going to hit. So how do I know how to find the digest Cocoa 1A 7E? And you need to know whether to go to the manifest API or the blobs API. The way that we were starting to propose it there is manifests need to be known by a registry. So if the media type is known and is known to be a manifest media type, you know to go to the manifest API. If it's unknown, it goes to blobs, because blobs don't need to be known media types. So is that what you're trying to get to? Is you're mixing blobs and manifest in that object collection? And then the whole thing can point to something else.
Yes. It's a way of organizing the blobs and the manifests so that you can have something that's coherent and taggable that a client can reference all at once.
Okay, all right. Then I guess I understand what you're trying to do here. That's why you did objects as opposed to layers or blobs, because you're trying to be generic on it.
Yeah.
Including, and it could have been named descriptors for that matter. It's just because you're intentionally.
Yeah. So I am not, again, I am not really that invested in what we call these things. I guess what I am invested in is some kind of upgrade path from what we have right now to what seems to me like what we want, which is the ability to combine all these disparate kind of blobs and manifests and index into something more coherent. So any other questions?
Sajay?
Hey, thank you. Nisha, thanks for submitting this proposal. One question I would like to understand is, how do you recommend we would filter for objects of a given digest here? So you have a reference and you have digest SHA BEC. What is the recommended approach to get objects of a particular type, or this entities of a particular type here?
So this is kind of a shared burden between the client and the server. So this is kind of why I put description over there, because if you want to query something of a particular type, you can query for the description and see if it has a thing called artifact type, and then collect all those types of artifacts. So suppose you wanted all the signatures that refer to this node, or all the signatures encased in this node, then you would get the description and look for an artifact type over there that says signatures, and then collect all of the and then filter out all the digests that are of that artifact type. So that one, yeah, so that is more of a client side kind of filtering than a server side filtering. But I feel like it can be shared somewhat.
So what is the artifact type you're talking about in this in the schema right now? There is description, and is there another field that I might have missed? I'm sorry if I did.
There isn't. I purposefully made that generic because what I had gathered from all the discussions that we've been having is that folks would like to have their own artifact type without relying on IANA, and would like to have something that says, this is my special kind of thing that I had defined. You can only use it with this client, or OCI can have their recommended, like OCI recommends using IANA artifact types, and we can recommend putting in the description artifact type if you would like to do some filtering around that. But I purposefully did not add artifact type in this.
So what are your thoughts on backward compatibility if we try to take this and ship these objects to an existing registry today? Is that just, it won't happen?
Okay, it depends upon what you mean by backwards compatibility. So if someone was, I don't think this is going to touch any of the existing clients that rely on V2. But if someone wants to build on top of V3, they can still use V2 objects, but reference them using V3.
I'll give
that
you a
is
third one.
Okay.
A third one I'm thinking of is, let's say Docker Hub takes this and applies it to a bunch of their base images that we all use. And I now copy this image into my registry, which is not updated. And so I try to copy these resources that have all this extra metadata on it over to an existing version 1 registry. Do I lose all the metadata? Do I lose everything?
That is a good question. I would think that you would lose all the metadata if you copy it over to V2. If you copy it over to a registry that doesn't support this.
Yeah. Okay.
But yeah, moving something from V2 to V3 doesn't lose anything. I'm still thinking about that. Is that what backwards compatibility means? Is like you don't lose all that metadata?
It means a different thing to everybody, depends on who's asking the question.
Yeah.
So one big use case though is to make sure that if we have an old client out there, that it doesn't get broken by having something stored in this format. And so as long as the V2 data is there, I think we're good. But yeah,
that was my understanding. Like the V2 data exists and will not be tampered with using this method. The other thing I was thinking as far as upgrade path is concerned is actually moving it, like combining it with index.json. But I'm not sure how that would work really without stepping on clients that rely on index.json to pick a platform.
Yeah, if there's no platform in there, it gets a little interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, I feel like this was the best way to not touch that. Any other questions?
I was going to ask the same thing. If there are no others, I've got one last topic we can talk about, which does apply to this, but I wanted to save it for a separate.
Okay, well, I'll yield the floor to you. I can still share my screen if you want.
I've got something else to share, and so I was gonna...
Oh, okay, then I'll stop sharing. There we go.
Just quickly, Nisha.
Yes, sir.
I captured everybody's questions in the notes, but I couldn't capture everybody's answers. I assume, well, your answers. I assume you can go ahead and do that, but
Yes,
at least
I
you've got
can.
a running list of everybody's questions. So if you want to add them or address them some way, you can.
Okay, I will.
So the thought that I had on this was that, yeah, my mic is still on. It's kind of the picture we're trying to draw today, where we've got an index, probably a few images under there. Those images have a bunch of blobs. And now we're trying to define, here's an artifact. And that artifact has a reference that points back up to the image. But in reality, that line is, from the garbage collector standpoint, that line is reversed. Where we're saying when we query this image, tell us all the references, it'll go find all these artifacts. And so we're building these APIs where we've got this extra little reverse kind of error going on here is what we're making. And so what I wanted to think about was the challenge where, it's conveniently hidden there. If you ever can make an object that can point to something, and it can also create a reference to something, from the garbage collector standpoint, we get a loop. And I'm not sure that's a bad thing. And so I wanted to throw it out here to see if people actually think it's a bad thing or not. The one solution to this is that you always say that references can only go to manifest, and we can only put it on an object that can't point to a manifest. And so you can't make this loop scenario in that case. And so you can only put it on the image, you can't put it on the index. And by doing that, you can never have a reference that points to one of your own children, and so you can't make a loop. So that is an option to solve this. But the other option to solve this is to say that it's not really a problem, because the only times we would have one of these loops that we care about, we're worried about creating a situation where you couldn't garbage collect it because you're just looping around and you're always counting the same reference over and over again. But I don't think you would ever actually get into that loop if you delete all the tags and we're only concerned about garbage collection when the object is untagged. But that is a big assumption that I'm making there. So that's why I want to throw it to the group is, how does that feel like it applies to other registries out there when you're thinking of making your retention of garbage collection policies with just knowing that, hey, index is no longer tagged, therefore we never get into the situation where we're even counting the references here, and so we don't even care about that. And if index is tagged and we get into this loop, we just kind of say, well, we counted index once, we counted image once, it is therefore there, we're done counting. We don't need to keep going through the loop over and over again because we got back to index, we saw that index had already been counted. We can skip out of our logic at that point. From people that are familiar with garbage collection processes, I don't know how many we've got on this call. I want to throw it out there. What are your thoughts? Is this a problem we need to solve? And if not, then we've eliminated a huge problem from what I was thinking of different challenges we're facing. And if so, this is something to think of from your proposal, Nisha, which is we've got this generic object. An object can have a reference, or we've got the generic node. A node can have a reference to potentially one of the child objects that's also within that object list. And that's where you can create those loops.
So
Go ahead.
oh yeah, I was going to say that was kind of one of the reasons why I had a list of objects and a reference. And yeah, I think that may have been something I did not add to this proposal, was that a reference cannot connect to another node manifest. So similar to what you were saying is that you can only have references to images or blobs, but not, itself.
But can a reference point to one of the objects?
The reference cannot point to one of the objects that is encased in the node.
And how would you guarantee that? How would you provide that assurance? Is that just from policy, or is that from design of which objects you can point to?
Yeah, I don't know. I tend to lean towards design or implementation to check whether the reference is actually the same as one of the objects. But that can be something that is defined in the spec, no?
Easier to find the spec if it's one of those things that just logically doesn't even work. Like we don't have a reference that points to a blob, and therefore you can't create a loop that way. And so it just depends. If we say that, okay, you can have a reference to an image and you can also have an object to an image, because images are childs, they'll be both. In that case, it gets very complicated to say, but then we're going to verify that you don't have one of these child objects over here. Especially if one of your objects can also be an index, which can then point to another index, which can then point to an image. You get these long chains.
We actually document how that loop gets done in this series of time, because you have to have something in the registry to point to it. You have to have the digest to be able to point to it. It doesn't have to be in the registry. But the idea of actually how you would create a loop is not that
so. It is pretty simple. I think we assume that it's not. We'll have the digest of this image. Call it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The index will say my child manifest is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. If we also say that the index references 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, we're creating a second pointer. But just remember that pointer, while we create it from index pointing to image, logically from the garbage collector is reversed.
There's no ref counted. Like
There's still a ref count, and that's where I'm getting to the question of, does it matter that we can create loops? Because if it doesn't, I think a while back we said that this is a big problem. We didn't want to create this problem. We avoided this from all kinds of other situations, so we couldn't go down certain paths. And so that's where I was originally thinking, well, the only way you solve that is we make sure that the reference from an image, an image can only have blobs, and that way you solve it that way. You never create a reference from something that can point to its child. And so you just outlaw the case that an index can have a reference. But if we say that it's just not important, because we're going through a marking. We say, okay, we've used index because tag's pointing there. We've used image because the index pointed to the image. And then we follow this reference back to index. Well, index is already marked, we're done. We can skip that part and we're not stuck in a loop in that case. Versus if we have a tag pointing to index, then or if you don't have a tag point to index, then you don't mark anything and then you just delete everything. I'm not sure if there are other scenarios I'm not thinking of in that case because I've never written a garbage collector.
I guess I got to call us because the tags are another ref count, right? You have tags, you have multiple tags pointing to, sorry, one tag, no, multiple tags can point to the same digest of a manifest. The manifest can point to multiple blobs and multiple manifests can point to multiple blobs. So each one of those is a ref count. So I think the question is, the place that we've tried to clarify this is down level references are hard dependencies, and you basically just do the ref count minus, and then up level references, it's also a ref count. But this is where we got a little vague and said, look, you don't, if the parent, you could keep the child if the parent gets deleted, if that's what you want.
Yeah, if you're strictly relying on reference counts, you know, I think you're thinking of this top picture here where we've got an index, assume this is tagged, we've got an image. It has artifacts. These artifacts are not tagged. These artifacts point to the image with their reference. In order to ensure that the artifact doesn't get deleted, we now need to mark the artifact or up the ref count there, even though the pointer is going from artifact to image, we're marking it from image to artifact, right? We're on the same page there.
I'm trying to read your arrows. I think because you have the hollow arrow and the solid arrow. I think we're saying is the solid arrow pointing up to the image. That's a reverse index. That's a reverse reference. So the artifact has a subject, or it's a child of image is what I think you're saying there, right?
What I'm saying is artifact itself has a pointer to image.
Right.
It's the one that actually defines the digest. But
Okay.
in terms of the garbage collector, we're assuming the reverse is what we're looking at.
If you delete the purple thing, that's totally fine. If you delete the green thing, you have the option to delete the purple thing.
Yeah. And that's where if we're doing ref counts, how do you count in this situation? Do you just keep, does that count increment indefinitely? And that could get problematic. That's where just marking that it's used at all makes a nice garbage collector, but I don't know how people have written their garbage collectors, and we could be getting in some hairy situations. So I will throw that out here. I'll bring this up as well later on the OCI call later this week and see if other people over there have thoughts on this, because this could be something we need to solve, or this could be something that we don't have to solve. It just depends on what people say in terms of the garbage collection land, but this could affect how we build our references going forward.
It's interesting, just to put a piece on it, because there's one other piece to this, is the garbage collection is an implementation detail. It was really a matter of like life cycle management. So by linking to manifest, you're linking from one thing that has a life cycle to another thing as a life cycle. Blobs themselves, in practice, tend not to have a life cycle. They are a dependency of something else. So I know there's been discussion around blobs should be individually referenced and so forth, but that's not generally how registries are implemented. A blob that doesn't have a pointer from a manifest is typically subject for deletion. So by keeping a reference, where the place that I got most confused on how we were trying to do this back when Justin was making some proposals is when blobs can reference other blobs, because then you make such a tangled intertwined of things. It's really difficult to try to rationalize any kind of deletion or lifecycle management so somebody can manage the size of the content of their registry. When you're pointing from a manifest to another manifest, then you're saying, hey, these things have individual life cycles. And as long as that thing gets deleted, fine. And the other thing that's pointing to it, it's either a null pointer or it can get a cascade delete. Those are trackable things. So I think that's the bigger differentiation, was the blob pointers versus manifest pointers.
Sounds good. I think we're at the top of our hours. So next week, are we good with going with proposal B and discussing that?
Yep, sounds good.
Sounds good. Thank you, Nisha.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Nisha.
Should I, before we go, should I add something about how garbage collection would work with proposal C, or I don't have to.
Whether you do or not, I would encourage not to worry about garbage collection. I would worry about how you manage life cycle management.
Okay.
I think in general, we have said that OCI wants to make sure it's possible to be done, but we don't declare how it's done just because we haven't done that in OCI and ever anywhere else.
Right. Okay.
Cool.
I guess,
See everyone next week.
With that, yeah. Take care,
Thanks,
everyone.
folks.
Thanks a lot. Bye-bye.
Everyone.
Bye-bye.